What's up everybody? Since the announcement of Overwatch 2 way back at BlizzCon, fans have been asking and hoping and dying to see or hear anything more about the highly anticipated sequel. But to date, Blizzard has remained almost entirely tight-lipped about it, and the community has, understandably, become quite frustrated by this. So I decided to make this video to shed some light on why exactly Blizzard has been so quiet, when we can expect to learn more, and what exactly we have to look forward to once Overwatch 2 finally does come our way. This is Master Ian Gamer, and real quick I want to mention that if you enjoy this video, then be sure to subscribe and hit that bell icon to get notified about all my future uploads and Overwatch content. But now, let's talk Overwatch 2. The first thing I need to touch on is its release date. Overwatch 2 isn't, and never was, going to release in 2020. Even in the alternate timeline where the pandemic never happened, Blizzard never planned to release the sequel this year. And I've been saying this since its announcement. Based on the way Blizzard discussed the game back at BlizzCon, it was pretty evident that this wasn't something we were going to see within the next 12 months. I mean, just listen to what Overwatch game director Jeff Kaplan had to say regarding it.
Also, I know the other big question is like, well, when do we get it? What's the date on this thing? I don't know. I have no idea. Like, just let us make it great. Like, that's what we care about more than anything. We don't have a date in mind.
And to emphasize, I really don't think Jeff was just saying that. I believe that as of November 2019, Blizzard themselves genuinely didn't know when Overwatch 2 would be releasing. And when we're talking about a project as big as Overwatch, that's saying something about just how far from finished they were at that point. And this has only become more apparent as time goes on. Not only are we way over halfway through 2020 at this point without any significant updates or announcements regarding the game and its release, but the little tidbits of information we have gotten over the past months suggest that Overwatch 2 is not at all close to release. These include details from Jeff Kaplan discussing how the devs are still actively experimenting and designing major core components of the game itself, the fact that, as of the time of me making this video, there are still a number of Blizzard job openings listed for pretty important positions on the Overwatch 2 development team, and of course, the near absolute radio silence we've gotten from the dev team regarding the sequel. Overwatch 2 is not the sort of title that Blizzard will just spontaneously shadow launch. They're going to build up to its release, as they've already started doing when they announced it back at BlizzCon 2019. And since I know there's going to be at least a few people bringing it up in the comments, yes, there have been, quote, leaks stating that Overwatch 2 will launch in 2020, and no, not a single one of them thus far has been proven true. Anything that lists 2020 as being Overwatch 2's release year is strictly running on rumors, nothing more. Now, another aspect I'd like to touch on is the follow-up I hear from most people when they realize that Overwatch 2 won't be launching this year, which is that Blizzard should have never shown the game off at BlizzCon 2019 if it wasn't slated for a 2020 release, especially since they evidently aren't going to give us any more updates or details about it during this time frame. However, I have to disagree, as I actually understand why Blizzard announced Overwatch 2 in the way that they did. Think about the past year of Overwatch 1 content, or rather lack thereof. Now imagine if we'd gotten the same amount of minimal content, but also didn't know that Overwatch 2 was in development. It would literally appear as if the Overwatch devs were just sitting on their hands doing almost nothing. By announcing the sequel back at BlizzCon, we as the community are at least aware of what's taking up their time and effort. Does that make us any happier about Overwatch 1 being neglected in the meantime? No, of course not. But at least we have some idea of what Blizzard has been up to. By announcing Overwatch 2 that far ahead of time, Blizzard gave us some insight into what's to come, and that's a heck of a lot better than having nothing. And on a similar note, if Blizzard wants us to know that they have something big in development, then why haven't they given us any further updates, details, or progress reports since BlizzCon? Well, for starters, technically they have. Some of the devs, mainly Jeff Kaplan, have given us small tidbits of further information regarding the direction and ideas they have in mind when it comes to the sequel, but admittedly these have been pretty minimal. However, Blizzard's silence isn't without purpose. The reason for them not giving us any updates is likely because they don't want to commit to anything too early. For example, one of the things we know will be coming in Overwatch 2 is new looks for all the old heroes. We already saw a number of these at BlizzCon last year, so let's say that while developing the sequel, Blizzard decides to give us an update on some of the content they're working on and shows us Roadhog's new look. Hooray, that's fantastic, and everyone is satisfied. But then as Blizzard continues development, they realize that a different look for Roadhog would actually be more appropriate and better fit the direction of his story. That then means that Blizzard would have to either retcon what they already showed off to the public, or stick to the original, inferior, and less fitting design. Obviously, they'd ultimately want to go with the second design they made, but retconning in this way is never a good idea, as it makes the dev team look tentative, short-sighted, and, well, downright unprofessional. So in the long run, they're better off not showing us anything early at all. And this could happen for any aspect of the sequel. Maybe they decide to change the mechanics of a game mode they're developing. Maybe they decide on a different location or aesthetic for a specific new map. Maybe they decide to take the story as a whole in a completely different direction. In all these instances, it's better for Blizzard to just keep quiet about what they're developing so that up until they have a finalized, satisfactory product to deliver, they'll remain free to tweak and adjust things as need be. And sure, Blizzard has of course already committed themselves to some things, such as the new maps, hero looks, and game modes they showed off at BlizzCon, but those things were necessary in order to sell the idea of what Overwatch 2 is going to be. Now that they've shown us what we can expect, they're making the smart choice of keeping quiet on other fine details so they can craft and iterate the final product to the best of their abilities. Interestingly enough, this is actually something which I personally can relate to in regards to my own YouTube channel. I'll frequently get asked by subs and followers to give some insight into what kinds of videos I'm working on, but I'm usually hesitant to do so because of how often I end up postponing or scrapping video ideas. I don't like publicly committing to something that I'm not sure I'll be able to adequately deliver, as it betrays people's expectations and ultimately comes across as unprofessional. So in that regard, I absolutely understand Blizzard's hesitance to tell us anything more about Overwatch 2 just yet, as they don't want to commit to or set expectations for things which they may ultimately be unable or uninterested in delivering. Now, that doesn't mean that Blizzard should be completely silent about everything. It could easily still be in their best interest to give us some updates and information as time goes on, but for whatever reason, it would appear that Blizzard just hasn't felt ready or the need to do this just yet. If anything, this seems to be yet another indicator of just how far off the release of Overwatch 2 really is, as it suggests that many of the overarching mechanics, character designs, and features haven't been finalized yet, or at least aren't close enough for Blizzard to want to show them. At this point, it seems unlikely for Blizzard to give us any more details about the sequel until next BlizzCon, which, I'll remind you, was delayed due to the pandemic and will unfortunately be taking place as an online event in early 2021. But the last major thing I'd like to address in this video is why exactly Overwatch 2 is taking Blizzard so long to develop. After all, isn't it just an expanded version of the original? Drop in a few new maps, heroes, and cosmetics, slap on a PvE mode, which we've already played a functioning demo of at BlizzCon. Seems fairly simple, so what's the holdup? Well, in reality, Overwatch 2 is likely going to be a much bigger product than we realize. The devs have hinted at this a bit over the months following BlizzCon, with them alluding to changes in the way roles, crowd control, and other fundamental mechanics are going to work, as well as suggesting that certain heroes may even undergo substantial reworks in the sequel. On top of this, it was revealed in an official Blizzard survey that Overwatch 2 may include new customizable legendary skins, which on their own would be a cool new feature, but might also be evidence of there being a vastly expanded cosmetic system. However, perhaps the most telling of the scale of Overwatch 2 is a quote from Jeff Kaplan regarding Blizzard's own vision of what they want to achieve with the sequel. What Overwatch 2 becomes for us is another great opportunity. It's a moment where people expect and are hoping for radical change. This is what a sequel is all about. You're not just going to give us the same game, right? So as developers, I think we can all be excited about the opportunity that Overwatch 2 brings us for, okay, it's time. We've been playing the same game for many years now. It's time to move on to the next thing. In Jeff's own words, Overwatch 2 isn't just an expansion, or an upgrade, or a collection of content drops. It's a new game, an actual sequel. They're planning to make Overwatch 2 a wholly new and unique experience from Overwatch 1 in both the brand new PvE as well as the returning PvP. And judging by this statement, I think it's legitimately safe to say that the Overwatch 2 demo we saw back at BlizzCon wasn't actually representative of what the sequel will ultimately end up looking like. I don't mean just in terms of visuals, but also gameplay mechanics and core features. I talked about this much more in depth in a previous video of mine, which I recommend you check out if you haven't already. I'll include links to it in the video description and cards on screen. I will also mention though that despite being a sequel, the game will function like a free upgrade for existing players. That is, players who already own Overwatch 1 will have access to all the new PvP maps and heroes, and play with others who do buy Overwatch 2. This is something which the devs were very specific about back at BlizzCon. Now, that does leave some questions as for what exactly you get if you do purchase Overwatch 2. So far, it sounds like it will pretty much just be the PvE portion of the game, but it's entirely possible that there will be other aspects or types of content exclusive to Overwatch 2, which we don't even know about yet. Completely different game modes or story experiences perhaps, which will only be playable by purchasing the sequel. But while there appears to be a lot to look forward to once the sequel releases, there's unfortunately little hope for things in the immediate future. Blizzard is knowingly neglecting Overwatch in its current state so that they can bring us a more voluptuous, feature-rich experience in Overwatch 2, and their goal is to bring us that as quickly as possible. I think the best way of looking at Overwatch 2 is through a future retrospective sort of lens. Once we get the sequel, it'll feel objectively better than the original, and pretty soon afterwards we'll all be amazed that we were ever content with just playing Overwatch 1. That's why Blizzard is willing to force us through a content drought in order to reach it faster. Feeding us more content in the meantime would just slow down development of the sequel. Every game except Minecraft has finite replayability, and by delivering Overwatch 2 sooner at the cost of a relatively short content drought, Blizzard likely hopes to better retain player interest in the franchise overall than if they were to just keep on updating the original. Now, whether or not they succeed at this is still yet to be determined, but at least we can understand the plan Blizzard has for Overwatch going forward. Yes, it does suck for players right now, but if it works out, it'll all be worth it later down the line once we finally do get our hands on the elusive sequel. We've just gotta find some way of enjoying the content we do have for the time being until that potentially far off day finally arrives. But that's all I've got on Overwatch 2 for today. Be sure to like, subscribe, hit up that bell icon, and follow me on Twitter at MasterIanGamer if you enjoyed this video and don't want to miss any of my future Overwatch content. Special thanks to my YouTube channel members who help make these videos possible, and if you'd like to join them to earn some cool rewards, then just hit that join button down below. Today's comment question: how do you plan on holding out until Overwatch 2? Let me know in the comments down below. Otherwise, this is Master Ian Gamer signing off, and until next time, have a great day.